Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. First of all, I'd love to say thank you very much, Danny, for that introduction, and thank you, Julie, as well. Let's first of all find out where Bahrain is. I mean, it's probably some place where not many of you have heard about. So the Bahrain is strategically located right in the middle of the Arabian Gulf, a tiny, tiny, tiny island. But tiny as it is, it was a British protectorate from 1830 onwards. Now, being a British protectorate sort of kind of like made it an international location. And the beauty of this location is its strategic part, in the sense that it's right there between the routes to India and the routes to Europe. So it became a trading post between the two continents of Asia and Europe. And of course, Bahrain was in many ways a land of many, many diverse cultures, because when you kind of like attract people who want to start a new life, it's exactly the same as those who left Europe to go to America to find the land of opportunity, to find out how to make a better life for themselves. And the Jews that were there in Iraq at the end of the 19th century, they had all heard about Bahrain from the dhow boats that used to come up the Gulf. And the dhow boats that used to come up the Gulf obviously came along with the tales of what actually was happening in Bahrain. So the Jews in Basra knew about Bahrain, and the Jews in Baghdad did as well. And for those who were not totally happy with their lives in Iraq and wanted to start a new life, well, this was the perfect opportunity for them to actually come over to Bahrain. Now, the case in point here is my grandfather. He was a young boy when his mom passed away, and the father remarried, but he wasn't happy with his new mother. So he kind of like wanted to start a new life. And his uncle took him to one side and said, well, look, son, we can go to Bahrain, you and I, and we can start a new life over there. And that's exactly what they did. They came over to Bahrain and they started a new life. And my grandfather started off as a baker, doing very menial work, doing baking work. He moved on from being a baker to actually taking silver threads out of discarded clothing. And of course, in those days, the discarded clothes were very good quality. So you can imagine the silver threads that went into those clothes were of high quality. So what he used to do, he used to collect all these threads, and then using a process, an acid process, he sort of melted it down into some form of bars. And with those bars, he actually started trading in them. He started selling them. He got to the stage where he was selling those bars overseas to Johnson Matthey, a well-known metal merchant. So that was an amazing story for my granddad. But the point being that the Jews started filtering into Bahrain in the early 1900s because they saw an opportunity being a trading post. And the other family that came over to Bahrain that is very well known is the Kaduri family. And of course, the Kaduris, they were three brothers, and they were on their way to go to Hong Kong, and they stopped off in Bahrain en route. Well, one of them, Joseph Kaduri, absolutely fell in love with Bahrain and decided, well, I'm going to stay here. I'm not going to go on. And that's what he did. And he became one of the wealthiest merchants in Bahrain, because he was importing clothing, he was importing materials from Europe. And the other Kaduris who were with him decided to go on to Hong Kong, and they became the Hong Kong Kaduris. And what a fantastic story that family has been, really. So if you look at the 1920s and the 1930s, there grew a community of about you could say about 800 Jewish people here in Manama. And by the way, how did Manama get its name? That's quite interesting as well. Well, when the Dawods used to come and bring the goods and put the goods onto the land area by the customs, they used to ask around, well, where do we go to sleep? And people used to tell them, go to sleep over there, go to sleep over there. And that translated in Arabic is Ruhna Mahnak, Ruhna Mahnak. And somehow from that Ruhna Mahnak, we got the word Manama. And that's how Manama got its name, apparently. So that's a lovely story. But in those days,
Ebrahim, I was going to
yes.
quickly jump in, Ebrahim, and ask, since you're talking about Manama, if we could just show a quick little, intro video, so we can, feel like we're virtually transporting ourselves over there.
Absolutely. Please do.
Here we go. Just a short little couple images of Manama, where Ebrahim is calling from right now.
لم تكن مدينة عابرة، بل كانت عنوانا لحضارة ممتدة سطرها التاريخ على سواحل البحرين، بين مائها ونخلها، فكانت نموذجا للتعايش السمح والمحبة التي لا تجف ولا تنضب.
All right, a couple images of Manama. Thank you so much, Ebrahim.
So if I could, so the Jewish community in the 20s and 30s and 40s grew to roughly around about 800 traders, and they were all traders, and of course they were businessmen. They were people looking to earn a living. They were people doing whatever menial jobs they had to do to make a living. So they kind of lived alongside their Muslim brethren, their Christian brethren, and their Hindu brethren, all in the same way. They were all people on the same level. I mean, you didn't have this vast difference in rich people and poor people. You simply had traders, and traders were very friendly towards each other. And there's a very good saying in Arabic that goes like, Kul wahid li dina. And that means everybody has their own religion. So religion didn't actually play a huge part in whether you liked somebody or you didn't like somebody. It wasn't the case like that, because when you say something like Kul wahid li dina, you mean, well, okay, everybody's got their own religion and we're not going to go down that route. All we're going to do is, if we like somebody, we're going to get on with them. And that was the way that the Bahrainis used to get along together. Now, when I tell you this story of how close a relationship the Bahrainis had with the Bahraini Jews had with their Muslim brethren and their Christian brethren, it's a story of Yom Kippur. During Yom Kippur, of course, the traditional way that Yom Kippur was done here in Bahrain was extremely strict. I mean, no touching of lights, no watching TV, and absolutely nothing except reading the books. Because, of course, everybody was doing it at home when there wasn't a synagogue there. So it was a very solemn time for them. And the most amazing thing is that the Muslim families who lived next door to the Jews would send their children on Yom Kippur into the houses of the Jewish families and switch their lights on at the time they needed it and switch their lights off at the time they needed it. And all the things that the Jews were not supposed to do, they didn't need to worry about because the Muslims were doing it for them. That's how close a relationship they had. But that being one part of it only, they were living together side by side as people who were working together, kind of like workmates in many ways. But they were close. And the stories that I have heard about how they used to live together is mainly about the festivals of Purim, Pesach, how everybody used to get together in the synagogue. And even the Muslims and the Christians used to get together with them. And of course, the synagogue is a wonderful story of its own. And the reason being is that in Iran, there was a rabbi who said to his son was called Shimon Cohen. He said to him, Shimon, why don't you go to Bahrain? I've heard there are about 800 Jews there. They don't know much about their religion. They don't have a synagogue. So why don't you go over there and set up a synagogue for them and do a mitzvah for them? And that's exactly what Shimon Cohen did. He came over to Bahrain. He started working as a pearl trader. And of course, in those days, the best pearls in the world were from Bahrain. That's because we got sweet water under the tables, that sweet water under the sea, which is something that's special. So we had the best pearls here. And we had the likes of Cartier and a guy called Pack and someone by the name of Rosenthal, who was the main pearl trader at the time, who used to come to Bahrain and take all the good pearls. Well, Shimon Cohen befriended one of that family, and he befriended a gentleman by the name of Pack, who was the son-in-law of Rosenthal. And together, they bought the land for the synagogue and built the synagogue. And they put it in the name of the Millet al-Musawiyah. Millet al-Musawiyah is literally translated the tribes of Moses. In other words, the Jewish people. They didn't want to put on the deeds of the land and the building that this belonged to the Jewish people. So they put it, this belongs to the tribe of Moses. So because of that, and today we have a copy of the deeds in the synagogue, because of that, we have called our newly refurbished synagogue the House of the Ten Commandments to reflect that theme. But let me go back to why Bahrain had sweet water. Many people think that Bahrain was the original site of the Garden of Eden, because not only did it have the sweet water, it also had a multitude of graves and graveyards. And it could well be that many people wanted to come to Bahrain to be buried here, because Bahrain was like a special site. And we have one site in Bahrain, which is surprising. We have a tree of life that is ancient, very, very old. And it absolutely is, it's like one tree in the middle of a desert. And that is something that many people are amazed about. So that's a particularly nice tourist site to see. So going back to the idea of the synagogue. So Shimon Cohen set up the synagogue for the Jewish people for the Jewish Bahrainis in 1935. And from what I've heard from my parents, they have told me many times that it was a very lively synagogue of lots of people joining in, and it was a center of life because all the Jews actually lived around the synagogue area. So we come to, at the time of 1935, when the synagogue was created, Shimon Cohen did a huge mitzvah for the Jewish community here in Bahrain. He taught a lot of the Jews how to speak, he taught them Hebrew, he taught them how to pray properly, and he was really instrumental in creating the Jewish life here. So we really owe him a huge debt of gratitude. And I've got to tell you, his descendants came over to Bahrain recently. There were 50 of his descendants who came from Israel. They came on a trip, special trip. They visited the cemetery to pay respects to Shimon Cohen's wife, who's buried there. They came to the synagogue, and we had such a wonderful spiritual feeling in the synagogue when they were praying there. And one of the members is the son of Shimon Cohen. So we were amazed and honored to have them here in Bahrain with us. That was a special, special time. So if we now fast forward to perhaps go to 1948. Well, of course, 1948 changed a lot of things for the Jews.
Yes. Ebrahim, I was going to jump in one last time. Sorry. Before we jump to 1948, I'd love to show a little clip that you'd shared with me to share with everyone about like some images of Manama. And then later on, we could show the images of the synagogue as well. So here's a little clip. Let me just get exactly to the part. Hold on one second. Thank you so much. And see where it is. Yeah. And this is actually, many of you will recognize someone very special in this clip as well, as they interviewed different religious leaders around Manama.
مدينة المنامة تعتبر ملتقى الحضارات والديانات والتعايش والألفة بين سكانها والمقيمين والوافدين. تخطيط مدينة المنامة تخطيط قديم، وطبعا اندمج التخطيط القديم مع التخطيط الحديث، ففي أجزاء حافظت على طبيعة مدينة المنامة اللي هي بشوارعها، طرقها، أسواقها الشعبية، وتداخلت مع بعض المعالم التاريخية اللي مدينة المنامة لها إرث حضاري كمدينة المنامة في حدود 700 عام.
تقسيم المنامة يعود على النظام البريطاني مال الأيام الثلاثينات أربعينات. تقسيم على أساس أن المنطقة الدبلوماسية كانت لها دور، السوق كان لها دور، والمناطق المحاكم لها دور.
Manama is so special because Manama is a multicultural city, I will say rather. You can find people from different nationalities, different religions, different colors, and different cultures. They all living in a harmony in a very, very small area.
Thank you, Ebrahim. I just wanted to share and show a little bit more about that incredible religious tolerance that you were speaking of before. Feel free to continue.
Thank you. Well, if we, so fast forward to 1948, of course, the creation of Israel came about. And that creation of Israel caused kind of like, caused difficulty for the Jewish community in Bahrain. The synagogue, unfortunately, was ransacked, and the Jewish homes were attacked, and the rabbi was also attacked. And the reason for that was not because of the Bahraini families. It was nothing to do with them, but it was more to do with the expatriate Arabs who were working in the ports. And in those days, we had Yemenis, Omanis, and Egyptians working in the port. And they were the ones who kind of like walked through the markets, very upset about the news of the creation of Israel. So with that, the Jews got together, and the rabbi said to them, I don't think it's safe for us to stay here, even though there are documented accounts of the Jews being protected by the Bahraini families. So in fact, I was taking a group of tourists in Manama and showing them the places, exactly the same houses where the Jews were hidden to keep them safe from any attack. So with that, the Jews decided, a lot of the Jews decided to leave. So half the community, approximately half the community, left in 48 and went on to Israel. Of course, those that had Bahraini nationality, they were comfortable to actually stay and weren't too frightened to leave. So they took the chance to stay. But those that had, let's say, 3 or 4 daughters, didn't really feel comfortable in staying, because if the community kind of became a lot smaller, then they wouldn't be able to have a Jewish life properly here in Bahrain. So they're the ones also that decided to leave. So from 1948, the synagogue was not used. It was left there as kind of like an open wound. And unfortunately, everything inside was stolen, and the Torahs were stolen as well. So we didn't really know what happened to the Torahs or whatever until way later in the 1980s. We had a gentleman walk into our office and say to us, there's something I want to return to the Jewish people. And we said to him, well, what is that? And he said, it's the books, the Torah books. So we were amazed, absolutely amazed. We said, wow, can you tell us, why do you want to return them now? And he said, because in the family, they had so much bad luck, so much sickness, so much, and they figured, finally they figured that it must be the Torahs. So they returned the Torah. We sent the Torah onwards to the UK. And one of the Torahs couldn't be restored and had to be buried in the UK. The other Torah was restored and is used in a kindergarten. So that's absolutely wonderful. So with that, we had no synagogue for many years. And the Jewish community simply did all their festivals at home. We did Purim, everybody would give sweets to everybody. But all the festivals were done at home. Yom Kippur is the most solemn day for us, which we take extremely seriously. And Pesach also we were doing at home. Now, how do we get kosher food? Well, we weren't bringing in kosher food from any other country. So the women here all did their own cooking for kosher food. Pesach, they made their own. The ladies knew how to make unleavened bread. They made their own leaven. Unfortunately, it's not very tasty, but it was unleavened bread and we had to eat it. So that was for Pesach, but kosher food for us was food cooked at home and done in the way that traditionally we used the women used to cook it. So that for many years, the Jewish community, up to 67, we saw another large group of Jews leave because they felt that there wasn't like Jewish life flourishing in Bahrain for them. So they left, and that dwindled the community to roughly about 100 people only. And with that 100 people, we always kept a low profile. We always made sure that we didn't antagonize people. We made sure that we fitted in to the society. And I can honestly say that we were very lucky because Bahrain is a wonderful place to actually fit in. And the Bahrainis themselves are good people. So we never found it difficult to just live our lives in the way we wanted to. We had the freedom to do our religion at home, and that was good enough for us. And of course, any time we needed to do a wedding, or any time we needed to do a bar mitzvah, or any of the other requirements, we would always use one of the European capitals or America. Because what ended up happening is that we had family all over the world. So main thing is that a family in New York, family in London, family in Europe, and family in the Far East. So we had a wonderful selection of places we could always go to. So that being said, I'm going to give you this story. I'm going to tell you this story. That in 1948, when the Jews had decided to go, there was a decree issued to say that anyone who decided to leave for Israel was not allowed to return to Bahrain. But there was one case of a returnee who took chances. And when he came back to Bahrain, he was imprisoned for 6 months. But when he was let out for coming back here, he said it was a small price to pay for coming home. So that's obviously how much he missed being in Bahrain. But he was happy to return and be a part of the community here.
Ebrahim, can I actually jump in and ask you about that particular story? Because I meant to ask you this last time. Why do you think that decree was made? Why do you think that rule was made, that if you left, then you couldn't come back?
They weren't happy. They honestly were not happy with losing the community. They were not happy about it because the community was a large part of their life here in Bahrain. And don't forget, the Jews, they owned most of the businesses, and they were very much like the forward thinkers in business, and they were the ones that made the market work. So the Bahraini authorities were not happy at all to see such a large proportion of them go, and that's why they put that in. But that's yeah.
Thank you. I wonder, since you were speaking about the synagogue, we have another clip where you are actually in the synagogue, so we can show that as well. And actually, as you'll see at the end of the clip, we see some food as well, which you spoke about. So here's a little bit of visuals of the synagogue.
الرهبان
عائلات اليهودية كانوا مختلطين مع المجتمع البحريني طريقة أن كانوا تجار في الشغلات الإلكترونية، تجار في الخلق، تجار في البضاعات اللي تي من أوروبا. مثلا عائلة خضوري والأخ يوسف خضوري الله يرحمه هو اللي كان يجيب بضاعات من أوروبا عن الملابس، وكان يوزع البضاعات على السوق الشعبي وعلى سوق التجار. فشغلهم كان على طريقة إنه تسهيلات. أيام الثلاثينات والأربعينات كان يذكرني الله يرحمه الوالد إن كان في نوع من الاشتراك بين عوائل المسلمة وعوائل يهودية عن المناسبات، وكانوا يشتركون بطريقة إن كانوا يجتمعون في بيوتهم أو يجتمعون في الكنيس. يعني المحبة اللي بيناتهم تكون قوية جداً.
Wow, I want to be in that cafe with you, Ebrahim.
I'm telling
That just looks so delicious.
Anyone coming over will be treated to being in the synagogue, and then afterwards going to Haji's Cafe for a wonderful, wonderful traditional style breakfast. So definitely that's something to look forward to if you're making a trip here. But to come a little bit more fast forward now, I'd like to talk about the Abrahamic Accords and how we started to rebuild the synagogue. Well, of course, it was the most amazing news to hear that Israel and the UAE had made an agreement. And then we were all wondering, oh, is Bahrain going to be one of those? And sure enough, a few days later, we heard the news, and it was the most amazing news, really. So we were extremely excited about that. And with that news came a lot of changes. It made us feel a lot more, though we were comfortable anyway, but it made us feel very, very excited about being able to see our relatives again come over from Israel, and for them to actually come and see where their parents used to live. Where, you know, the houses are still there, the flats are still there, the cemetery is still there. So they can come and actually visit the place where their parents lived and where their parents resided. And one of the most amazing events that take place is when I get the visitors coming from Israel and I show them where their parents used to live. They are so, I mean, it's so emotional for them. Not only emotional, they sort of get a sense that, yes, we belonged here, we really did. And that's a wonderful thing. But more than that, the influx of visitors coming from Israel to Bahrain has meant that they are so excited to be able to talk to the local Bahrainis. And by that, I mean learning about the cultural aspect of what it means to be in the Gulf. If you visit the Emirates, there's a big difference. And the reason being, the Emirates, it'll be very hard for you to meet an Emirati. But if you're in Bahrain, no, you will always meet Bahrainis, and you will meet them in the markets, and there will be wonderful people talking to you, and you will get a sense of their culture, which is really nice. But above all, when I have Muslims coming into the synagogue and talking to us, and I say to them, well, look up there, and up there we have kept the 10 Commandments in Hebrew and the 10 Commandments in Arabic. And when they read the 10 Commandments in Arabic, they say to me, well, yeah, we have all that in the Quran. And I say to them, of course you have. There's no difference between the Quran and the Torah. And it makes them feel so much better. And then we have something even more special, which is something called the Siddur Farhi. The Siddur Farhi is the daily Hebrew prayers in Hebrew and translated in Arabic. And on a Saturday, when we do the service, and of course, because we don't have a rabbi full-time here at the moment, I kind of take the service as best as I can. So when I have some Muslim congregants, what I do, I ask them to recite Eshet Hayil in Arabic, whilst I do it in Hebrew. And I've got to tell you, like with the language, if you hear it in Arabic, you will be quite surprised. There is one part of Eshet Hayil that goes like Kol Yimei Hayeha, which in Arabic is Kul Ayyam Hayata. So there's so much similarity. But the point being is that when the Muslims actually, when they start reading and understanding what we're praying, what it means for in our prayers, they are very, very happy and they feel closer. So that is a wonderful way to coexist with people. All these experiences are born out of the culture, and the culture we have is one of living side by side. And to be honest, I feel as a Bahraini, I'm Jewish and I'm a Bahraini, and at the same time, I have the culture of the Arabic style. I always use worry beads. Now, worry beads, many people, they say to me, the worry beads are used by Muslims. I say, no, the Iraqi Jews were all using worry beads. They always had it with them. And don't forget, we've got 77 names for God. And the Muslims, have, I think we have 77 names. And the Muslims have 99 names for God. So when they count, they're counting up to 99. And that's why they use the worry beads. But for us as traditional Iraqi Jews, we follow the way in which our parents and their parents used to live in the environment that they lived in. So from that, we can now come on to the way it is today. Of course, today, we have our synagogue and it's fully functional. And we're incredibly lucky to have a Torah. And the Torah that we have is the one that Jared Kushner gave to the king of Bahrain, which is absolutely wonderful.
Wow! I'll interrupt again and ask if you could extend on that a bit. What was the reasoning, or how did that come about?
Well, it was all about everybody understanding that the king of Bahrain was promoting the coexistence idea. He was promoting peace around the region, and he really worked very closely with the Americans for peace. And Jared Kushner decided to present him with a Torah, and he said to him, "This is a Torah that I want you. That's for the synagogue, you know." So the king presented it to us, and we have it today in the synagogue. And we have used it already for a bar mitzvah, and we have used it for a wedding. And we can use it now whenever we get a minyan. And so we're very, very pleased with that. It is one of the highlights of our synagogue. And the visitors that come all are really very impressed. It is now a testament to really our parents and grandparents, those that had the Jewish life at that time. For us to see Jewish life grow again is an immense pleasure, and it makes us incredibly happy to do that.
And talking about seeing that, if it's okay with you, Ebrahim, I'd love to share the clip that we spoke about earlier of the rabbis coming to visit. I think that'll be incredibly inspiring. Absolutely. And then I should let you know, we do have a bunch of questions that are coming in. Once again, a reminder to everyone, feel free to send those to myself or to Julie so we can have our Q&A, which will be starting in just a very little bit of time.
On the sidelines of the U.S.-led Peace to Prosperity workshop, a small taste of what this region could look like. A short cab ride from the Four Seasons in the heart of Manama is Bahrain's only synagogue. This morning, the site of a rare opportunity, several people gathering for a symbolic prayer. Among them, U.S. Mideast envoy Jason Greenblatt, American rabbis Mark Schneier, Marvin Heyer, and Abraham Cooper.
It's been an amazing experience. It's like living a modern-day miracle to have this kind of prayer service here in Bahrain, and quoting the first president of Israel, Chaim Weizmann, who said that miracles can happen, but one has to work terribly hard for them. And to be in the presence of a group of people that work so hard in terms of strengthening and building Muslim-Jewish relations, and with the ultimate goal of bringing Israel and Palestinians together, we're truly blessed to be here this morning.
It's extremely emotional. You know what I thought of? We're here, and they were, at the end of davening, we all danced. But how did we get here? We got here because there's a state of Israel today. If there wouldn't be a state of Israel, all these destroyed synagogues, nobody would go into them, not here and not in Europe.
It's an extremely emotional experience. It's sort of like coming in and just hooking you up, no matter what your electrical outlet is, to a spiritual battery, and you walk out feeling a little bit taller and a little bit more, even though everybody else in the room didn't even agree. To order for breakfast. We come into synagogue.
A simple building on a small street, the synagogue was built in the early 1900s and renovated in 1996 by Duad Nonu. His niece is Huda Nonu, the former Bahraini ambassador to the United States. For her, seeing the gathering was a first-in-a-lifetime experience.
It was an amazing experience to see everybody here together, rabbis and businessmen and people just coming together and pray in our synagogue. It was an amazing experience. In my lifetime, it's been a long time. We've had minions, of course, at the cemeteries or in our houses where we usually have the services, but not shacharit. We don't do a morning service every day. So this was really nice.
Nonu told us Bahrain is a unique presence in this region, a place where inclusivity isn't far-fetched.
Bahrain we are a tiny community, but we have people from all different religions. We have Hindus, we have Christians, we have Catholics, we have the church, we have the temple that is over 200 years old. And in 1 kilometer in Bahrain, and His Majesty loves to say this, in 1 kilometer of Bahrain, you have all the different religions together, where we pray, and when we die as well, our cemeteries are next to each other. So we are bonded from birth to death. Bahrain is just, the coexistence here has been a long time. It's nothing new.
There's plenty of pessimism to go around when it comes to politics in this region. But here in Manama, at least for this morning, a taste of the potential. Nureed Ben, I-24 News, Bahrain.
Wow. I mean, can't get more inspiring than that. Really so grateful, Ebrahim, for you to share that.
Absolutely, absolutely. I just wanted to say that you got to hand it to the Bahrain government here, because if you think about it, the Jewish community, however small it is, we actually have a seat in Parliament. So we have a seat in the upper house of Parliament, and our representative there today is one of the Kaduri family, Nancy Kaduri. And she's our representative in Parliament. And there is one seat for us. So that's such an inclusivity, really. And I was the first one in Parliament, followed by Huda, and followed by Nancy. And then, of course, Huda went on to be our ambassador to the States. So that was an amazing event as well. But yes, this is how inclusive the Bahraini authorities are. That's why they're unique.
Ebrahim, I will jump in once again to say that we would love to go to Q&A, questions and answers, and I'll pass it over to Julie because there is a lot of questions coming in. Everyone's so excited to have this connection with you. And so
yeah, this was wonderful. Thank you so much, Ebrahim and Dani, for this presentation. We do have a bunch of questions. Sorry in advance that we probably will not get to all of them. But we will start. So let's start at the beginning. How old was your grandfather when he came to Bahrain?
He was a young boy. He was actually a young boy of around about 13 or 14 when he came to Bahrain, and he came with his uncle. So his uncle actually decided to come with him and brought him here, and then he started.
And where did you learn your English?
I was traditionally what happened in Bahrain, we always sent the kids outside to be educated. They got their basic training in. I got my basic training in Arabic, and then I was shipped out to the UK to study. And I spent many years in the UK until I went through university, and then I came back to Bahrain.
Okay, got it. Thank you. A lot of questions about the current population in Bahrain in general, and the Jewish population. How large is it? And are Jews returning to Bahrain at all? Is there still that rule in existence, or has that changed?
That rule has definitely changed. I mean, Jews who want to come back are more than welcome to come back, but on the basis that they have an attachment to Bahrain. We do know of our family members, some of them, who are interested in coming back, and hopefully they're going to be able to do so. But the numbers here at the moment are roughly around about 50 Jews only. That's the size of the community here. But it's an indigenous population, indigenous community. And we're the only indigenous community in the Gulf at the moment.
And in the synagogue, what's the role of women? Do they count in the minyan? Is there separation in seating?
Well, if I had my way, I'd count them in the minyan. But unfortunately, we have traditional views, and we can't do that. So it's a bit difficult. In fact, we had an amazing time when we wanted to bring the Torah. And we only had 9 men, but we had about eight women as well. So somebody said, okay, look, we can't count the women, but we can count the Torah as one. So, so we counted the Torah as a person, and we put the Torah out, and that worked.
I imagine it's you have to come to some compromise when there are only 50 people. You can't have multiple synagogues.
Well, it begs a lot of questions, to be honest, because if you think about it, the majority of the community here are old. I'm considered one of the younger ones, and I'm 62. So the reality is that we have an aged community, a very few young people, and the children don't stay here because when you educate the children abroad, then they don't really want to come back, and that's always been a problem for us.
You mentioned the Torah being counted for the minyan, so I'll ask, there was a Torah question. Were there any older Torahs that had been there from before? You mentioned the Torah was brought as a gift, the one that's currently being used. Were there any older ones that were there?
Yeah, the older ones, of course, they were stolen, but they were returned to the community. But we sent them onwards to the UK. To be restored. One of them was restored and kept in the UK in a kindergarten, and the other was buried in the UK. So they didn't come back to us in Bahrain. And to be honest, there are many times that we hear of Torahs that people want to sell, that they have in their possession. And we don't entertain that at all. We don't entertain any artifacts, because we don't want to encourage people to do that, and that's wrong, really. So we were without a Torah for many, many years, and then when Jared Kushner gave the king the Torah, that ended up into our synagogue.
Got it. And what about some other Jewish practices? Is there kosher meat? Is there someone to do kosher slaughter? Is there someone to do circumcision? Or any other Jewish ritual practices that you can tell us about?
Well, my uncle was the one to do Jewish slaughter, and I don't know how on earth he used to do it, but the way he did it was unreal. And maybe I hope I'm not going to be too graphic here, but the way he used to kill the chickens was very off-putting for the youngsters, I must say. but he used to be the one to do the kosher meats, and at the same time, they didn't believe in any fancy kosher things. They believed that whatever you didn't have that wasn't kosher, you should just avoid. So it was a case of, and in many ways, people used to fast all the time. I know this from my mother, and she used to tell me that yes, they used to fast on a regular basis. In 1 month, maybe they used to fast 3 or 4 days or 5 days. You know, they had a regular kind of pattern of fasting in the old days, which you don't see any longer. But that being said, the way they used to cook was completely kosher. It was always very clean. It was separated completely. The milk was completely separated from anything else. And that was a way in which we could say, well, that's as kosher as you could get.
A couple people asked about life in Bahrain during World War II and what it was like for Jews and whether Bahrain accepted any Jews that were fleeing during World War II and the Holocaust.
Very interesting. From World War II, no, there wasn't anything that happened here that we know about. All we did was we used to keep our heads down. I remember everybody used to keep their head down. But the stories of people coming here, it was simply with the Italian Air Force. I think they had a couple of times the Italian Air Force flew overhead. But apart from that, they never had any they never had any cause for concern during that time. And everybody stayed put. That's what I heard from them.
Someone was asking whether there's a Chabad in Bahrain, because seems, you know, there's often a Chabad everywhere. So
there's a Chabad in Dubai, but traditionally Bahrain, we are different. We're different Jews in the sense that we have our own pattern of doing things. We have our own way of doing things. We're kind of very much how can I put it? Kind of like mixed with the Arabic in many ways, and we don't do things so strictly as Chabad, but at the same time we have our own traditions which we don't want to lose. So it's not like we want to change the way we do things. We'd like to keep things the way we've been used to, and that's what we're trying to teach the children, to be able to continue that. And I got to tell you, the kind of habits that we have, like you think about it, if you visit the cemetery, well, on your way out, you have to wash your hands 3 times. But at the same time, you have to, after that, go into a shop and buy something. Because the idea we have is that cemeteries are always bad luck. And you don't want to bring that luck back home to you. So you have to go to a shop and deposit the bad luck there. That's kind of like habits we have here.
And are certain traditions kept to like Shabbat practices and especially with the kids?
Absolutely. Certain practices are kept very strictly. Shabbat practices are kept strictly. You know, no cutting fingernails on Shabbat, no smoking on Shabbat, and lots of things that we're not supposed to do on Shabbat that we grew up with, to be honest. And we drum that into the kids too. So it's just, but Shabbat's important to us. Shabbat's very important to us.
And I know we're reaching the end of our time, so I have one more general question about Bahrain that a couple people asked. And Donnie, if I missed anything that you feel was important in the chat box, because as I was asking questions, some questions may have flown by. What is the government of Bahrain? What type of government is it?
It's a monarchy, and the king we have a bicameral system. We have an upper house and a lower house, and the lower house is elected and elected from the whole population, and the upper house is appointed by the king, and the two have to work together to introduce laws and to amend laws. So that's the system that we have, and it's got checks and balances in there. But I've got to tell you, they really are the most tolerant people, the most wonderful people, and whoever's visiting Bahrain will really see some special kind of way in which people live.